Perfect. Alright, I just tipped over. So I'll get this intro playing and we will start. So starting the stream in 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to the Chuusotsu Rap Party 2.0, where things haven't gone completely to crap for me, and we're actually probably going to be able to do this. And once again, I want to give a warm welcome to my good friend from Fruit Bat Factory. How you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing just great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for showing up for 2 weeks. It's still so crazy how things went last week, but that's not what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on Chuusotsu, First Graduation, Time After Time, which is quite a title. Out of curiosity, do you know from the publishers like why they specifically chose like such a long title? Is it based on a manga or something? Because I know those titles tend to get really long nowadays.
No, it's an all original title, but it's actually the First Graduation is basically like first episode, but their way of calling it, and Time After Time is the subtitle. I mean, the name of that episode, so that's why.
Okay. Oh man, it's funny because like I could absolutely see this series being eventually brought into a production of some kind. I don't know, like obviously the way the community works, usually it has to either be a really amazing sales pitch idea to an anime publishing company, or it has to be a really popular medium. But this one just, I feel like, is something that could easily translate to the screen and easily be so, like, interesting and yet also approachable. That's probably, like, my biggest highlights for Chuusotsu as a title in its entirety, is approachability and, like, just, it very much pulls for the empathetic side without being, what is the word for it? Not overreaching. It's like,
I don't know.
It's like yeah, pitchy. Where they're trying to shove a moral down your throat so clearly. It's like, ugh. Like it does a good job of really finding that balance of like showing you like a person and their life and some of the struggles they go through from their perspective. So like when I first started it, I remember like I don't know, like really it was like, ooh, I don't know if I like her all that much. But by the midpoint, she was my favorite character of the whole thing.
Yes, really grows on you. She has such a wonderful introduction scene that you can kind of understand why Arrow is treating her like she does. But she turns out even more and more awesome over the course of the game.
I know, right? And Kotaro's like the best friend everyone should have. Is like,
yeah,
she's just
so
like,
sweet.
She's like, I got your back, and you could never, I never have a bad thought about any person ever.
Yes, he's really a sweet one.
And technically they all are really sweet. Like they have and that's what's fun is that like they really are so distinctive, even though they come from very similar backgrounds. And ultimately, like when it came to the hard hitting points about like having no real direction in life, struggling with developing true friendship, and never really feeling like they had any, and also just wanting to having a need of to find independence of some kind, like. They came from such similar backgrounds, but yet have such different flavors of character and motivation. It worked really well and synergized. Like they talked about synchronicities. Like I feel like as an audience member, I was synchronizing with them as well.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. I didn't think about this before, but Koiru and Arara are actually like the total opposites when it comes to personality, because Arara is like completely selfish, does exactly whatever she thinks, and doesn't really care about what other people think, while Koiru will always be ready to help everybody and tries to help everybody, even though there's no personal investment for her.
Yeah, and it's so cool to have that contrast, and yet to have them also like it absolutely. That another thing about it that made it work for me too is that we kind of had to get sold on the idea that they became friends over time, and it really felt like they did. And I think the biggest part about that was the whole arcs where they had to explore. With each other, like the beach episode was really about Arara and Arara reconciling.
Yeah.
And then in later parts, Koriro kind of coming to terms with like her, like where she wasn't so focused on helping those two get along, where she kind of was able to go on her little journey of really trying to decide, like what she really wanted from all this, because like. Even from the day one, she was like, she could tell she kind of was just caught up in the moment and just was drifting through whatever happened to come in her way. But then we get to see her really start making like hard decisions about like, no, I want this and this is what we need to do, and I want to do it because I care about these people.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you know? So as we go into the title, so it's first graduation, time after time. Like so, it's like effectively it's kind of saying this is chapter 1 or part 1 of future content to come out. Do you know from the publishers, is the future content like at least the serial content? Because you told me there's like a 1.5. It'll be a little different. But like when number 2 comes out, will we still be following these characters, or are we going to be introduced to new characters? And then like, are we going to be having like almost like a Marvel like, Chuusotsu like expanded universe where they all eventually come together and destroy the poison pulse?
Right. Well, the developers are pretty crazy, so I wouldn't rule anything out. But I'm pretty sure, from what I understand, that it's going to be the same main core cast. Probably new characters as well, of course. But it should be Arara, Aru, and Koiru as well.
I got like it had that teaser at the very end of the game where it kind of implied that Koriro, like when she got the message from her teacher, that like somehow that like it was kind of leaving a hook that she would be involved, but it depends. Like that, it could easily be like a reference that's made to her later at some other time. But I'd be really curious. I have to admit, the one thing I felt like I wanted more out of this than I got was an understanding of the world, like the way the world works. Mm-hmm. Like we had,
it's very much just teased. Like there are all these very informative little details dropped. Like you noticed that amount of people, like the world population that was mentioned at one point. Like that kind of stuff is just very marginally pointed out. You kind of have to make your own conclusions. And the world seems quite interesting, but we don't really learn much about it in this episode.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's a really good storytelling technique, like where it's like show not tell. Like we, like just because we don't know that much about the world, the characters are obviously familiar with the world, so it wouldn't make sense for them to sit down and have a 10-minute conversation about the state of the world and what happened in the past like 100 years, because that's not how normal people talk. But sometimes like something will get mentioned, and for us it's impactful because it's like, well, I didn't hear the fact that there's only 1 billion people in the world. Like what happened to the rest of them? That's a cool way to tell that story. So I'm hoping in future installments we keep getting those little nibbles and bits about like how this world works, how it came to be. And I think it's interesting that the ruler, like the person who's in charge, and apparently can have concubines galore, freaking Solomon over there.
We are going all out into the spoiler territory now. Okay. But actually, even beyond that, you have to keep in mind that these are just normal teenage girls living in a world that's like heavily moderated, and you kind of learn over time that they don't even know much about their own world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes me think it's like like I threw out a theory that a few people kind of disagreed with. I'm still not sure if I can rule it out though. The idea that like it kind of like remember how early on it almost seemed to imply that the nation that rose up and took over because of the nanobites could possibly have been something like North Korea, just because it talked about how it was like an eastern nation that was like a little like more north kind of thing. I don't know, it was very vague, and I don't know if it really that substantiated, but the idea that the leader's called the general sounds very militant, and at least in the takeover. And then they have the idea like if it is based on something North Korea-esque, then part of me almost wonders is like, is there really only 1 billion people in the world, or are they like somehow like teaching everybody that our people are the only people that are in the world, but there's actually like people that live beyond the borders of this nation. They just like heavily suppress that knowledge because there's obviously, like you said, there's so much control.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Even if you say it's a world government and all the world is united, then we don't actually know that for sure.
Exactly.
It's just what's in all the history books and everything.
And if you've got a totalitarianism type situation, they literally could put whatever they want in the history books, especially considering they control the internet.
Yeah, then again, with nanomachines making super soldiers, it's not that unthinkable that they do control the whole world.
I mean, fetch, they can make people like, they can make people's age like change, and they can legal prostitution. Like, I like how it got to that point. I sat there and I was like, I saw the word, and I was just like, you know, that absolutely makes sense, but it's so horrible. It's so crazy to think about. Like, I'm glad it took them a while. If they dropped that in like the first part, I would have been like, do I really want to keep reading this? But now with the context, it was like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Right. If you think about it, they do actually hint about it in one of the very first scenes with that scouter guy. Like, they visit that same location several times later and talk about the same topics, so it's something that could have actually come up in like the very first scene of Aroe meeting Koiro.
I must have completely missed. I got the impression that like there was the guy as being sleazy, but I didn't really understand the whole system yet, and so I thought it was just being like a more typical like, oh, someone's being sleazy because that happens in real life. But yeah, you're right. Like in hindsight, that was a bit more of a clue of like what could actually happen. It's just crazy. Like it's a brilliantly crafted world that like it has a touch and foundation in reality and things that we actually see, and yet also takes things to an extreme and really plays with the idea. Like, because on the surface, you have to admit, there's kind of like, it's kind of a nice thought to be like, oh yeah, like, you know, like you'll get a job that suits you, and like, yeah, you have to work it your whole life, you don't really get to choose it, but like it's nice to have that feeling of like knowing that there's a place for you. Like at first, like that can sound really appealing on paper, and then you get to see like the dark application of it in this series, and it's like, yeah, that's absolutely true what would happen. Oh man.
Yeah, I can definitely see why it's something that would, in quotes, work in real life, because most people kind of are just happy that they have like a steady life and don't need to think much about anything.
Yeah, so. And I think it's at the very least, it's another one of those things where like I would play this and I was listening to it, and I think I even said it in a few, especially the earlier episodes. Like it made me want to go and vote. Like it made me want to be like, I like living in a world where I can choose my fate a little more and not be shuffled into categories, because there's an appreciation to that. And I think like while it's nice to feel like you have like safety nets, like there is that point where like finding that line where it's like there's too much interference, and like that's currently like politics today, is like that debate of like how much control should be in the government's hands versus people's hands. Is it irresponsible to let people have to like determine their own like medical care? Is it irresponsible for people to be allowed to purchase weapons? Like it's very much hot topics in the United States, and it's topics that have been talked about and fought about in other countries as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's even more advanced in some other countries. But yeah, the way that the game introduces the whole world is kind of interesting. Like in the early episodes, I saw comments like, hang on, this doesn't really sound like a utopia to me, like where's the freedom of choice and everything like that. And I was like, Yeah, the
That's
game doesn't actually really paint it as a utopia once you get further in.
well, like that's the whole point. Is like, I mean, every book that's about a utopia shows how terrible that would actually work. Like, there's tons of ideas that sound great, but then in application are terrible. Like that's a
Yeah.
Catch 22, Fahrenheit 451, even Plato's Republic. Like, had some really interesting, renovative ideas, but also some pretty terrible things in it too. Um, and like I think that's kind of, and honestly, while obviously it doesn't go so in depth as a lot of those utopia or dystopia books, um Chuusotsu definitely plays the same notes, where it presents you with a world and situation, um and like it shows, and like it feels like you are having a dialogue through the whole game, especially with the focus on philosophy. It feels like we either, even if it's just with yourself, like you're having a dialogue about like, is this moral, is this right, are these things that would be practical or useful or good. And so you get to explore what books like Fahrenheit 451 and like want you to do, is they want you to consider like what like something sounds good, but is it really? And then things that are kind of feel like they're kind of rough or scary, are they actually worth it in the end anyway?
Yeah. And I think in some ways this is definitely, although it's a self-contained story, quite, I think it also is quite strongly like a teaser for the whole world. Like there are so many questions that you don't necessarily even think to ask, like why is this whole pilot project with the soul dispenser even a thing in this world?
Mm-hmm.
What are they after? Like it's kind of just like the setup for this game, but I'm sure it has some wider implications for the world itself that are not revealed in this episode.
Oh yeah, and like it's kind of horrible too. Like so they take that exam. Like it must be like in like the entrance into middle school, and that exam effectively determines what your whole life's gonna be. And it's
Yeah.
like it's weird that that would be the time they would choose it, because it's like, is that really about like learning about aptitude, or is it about giving them a role so they don't have like room to have real dreams? Because I didn't know what I
Yeah.
was doing till I was in my early 20s. Like, I thought I knew what I wanted to do at 18, which is much later than what these girls were supposed to, like, know what they were doing. And then, I had some life experience, and then find out, oh yeah, I don't want to do psychology. And so then I pursue something else. But it's like, I don't get to, I don't know, it's like, it's hard to swallow that idea of, like, someone else determining everything for me.
Yeah, I actually think that there must be like even further examinations that will still change your seal. Like for example, what if you go to a high school? I don't think you'll get like a permanent high schooler seal in that case, or university after that, or something like that, because they do mention later that somebody went to college and stuff like that. So there is higher education.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there must be even further transformation points, but it's probably just like middle school is the first cutoff point. Like some people are deemed not like education worthy or something, and they'll just be put into some job right away.
Oh, dang, that's so that would suck so bad. Oh man, it's an interesting idea. I do want to change gears a little bit, because like we haven't really been able to sink our teeth into that, but I want to talk about some more personalized stuff. Like every time I try and think, I ask a question like best girl, best waifu. But I think for this game, I want to say like, how hard do you personally ship Arara and Arara?
Pretty hard.
I
That's an
know.
awesome combination.
I want them to be together so hard. Like they're so cute, and
Yeah.
Arara is adorable. Like I loved how she's like super like confident, suave, and was like, "Oh, look at me! I know all this stuff, and I'm so impressive and smart." And then like when when she and Arara like have like their little moments, especially like when Arara like invites her to come to join her in the bed instead of sleeping under the bed, which is insane. Like she has the whole thing. She's just like, "Are you a lesbian?" And she's like, "What?" I it was like, "Fetch,
Yeah.
you got it bad, girl."
Yeah, and I have to say, she has really great voice acting that really makes her
Oh, it
shine
was
in
so
this role.
good. Oh, I wish I were a good voice actor. I want to even do like stupid little roles every once in a while someday. But like, I just don't think I've got a good enough voice for it. Like for actual voice acting, though, it's like it's something like the more I listen to it, and the more I wish I could participate someday. But Yeah, no, like it was exceptional. I think that's the other thing too, like the audio quality in the game, like the music. Oh my goodness, the intro music, like it's been playing in the background and everything. It gets stuck in my head. It's so good. Oh, by the way, real quick, Freezorg, hello. He waved in chat a little bit ago, and I
Yep.
apparently didn't notice,
Yep.
but thanks for joining us. I bet you we're not gonna have a big audience for this one, but that's okay because like the best I've learned how to archive these, and so I actually add it to the playlist. So anybody who's watching Chuusotsu in the future, which I find that most of my series actually have a lot more success after I finish them than while I'm doing them. I think
Right.
a lot of people like to binge watch, and so I can attach these to those playlists because normally they just kind of fade, like they don't get brought up in my queues anymore after like a couple weeks. But if I
I see.
lock it in a playlist, it stays saved there, so people will be able to listen to this in the future.
Yeah, that's nice. Oh, I see we have our awesome couple of Freud and Jung on the screen
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, they're so good. Let's see. The other thing I want to talk about, so like, I'm gonna get a little more serious on us now that we've kind of had to like gotten the pleasantries out. That's not super serious, but like, while I was watching this, funny enough, was in my recommendations, like YouTube algorithm tends to screw people over, especially small channels like me. But it does have some good points, and I found one morning this random news like story that covered hikikomori, the Japanese, which is a Japanese word that effectively means like those, like he without life, or he who shuns life, or the world. And like while it is different from Chuusotsu, you can definitely see the inspiration for Chuusotsu and the lifestyle and often like the circumstances of a Chuusotsu is heavily influenced by the real life people who live as hikikomori. Now,
Yeah,
had you been familiar with that word at all? Like, have you heard that before?
yes, I'm familiar with it from other Japanese media, but yeah, you can definitely say that Arue is hikikomori. It's not really a Chuusotsu thing, but Arue definitely is one in the past in the story.
Yeah, the other two definitely don't seem as much of like shutting themselves away from the world, but Adara was really the focus, and so it really kind of plays an important role. And like that, I got one. I actually have it linked in the Chuusotsu general chat. I think I'm gonna pin it before I archive that chat room. So if you're interested, like say you're listening to this like years from now, if you know, I'd be surprised if you are, but if you are, hi. Or like whether you're listening now or listening in the future, if you go into that message board, you should be able to find it, and it is a fascinating look into the lives of people who, for various reasons, just find dealing with just life and daily tasks so daunting that it's preferable just to stay home. And there's so much about it that is, I don't know, it's so alien, I think, a situation for most of us. I would almost equate it to trying to understand what it's like to be somebody who has something like OCD. Like, and I'm not saying like there's the passive, like people say like, oh, you're so OCD, like you have to have things just so. I'm talking like the actual diagnosis of OCD,
Right.
where like in the person's mind, reality is very different from what we experience. And to just say get like, oh, you can get over it, or just ignore those impulses, or just change the way you live, it's not like that. That's really not an option, because these types of issues go way further than just personality. Like, I think a lot of people might get confused and think that hikikomori are people who are just really, really introverted, and that's not the case at all.
Yeah, I haven't seen that documentary, but I know that's actually a really big problem in Japan, and it's not something that you would really know without reading about it, because these people don't really exist in the societies, so you don't run into them anywhere because they're just staying at home.
Yeah, the closest I've experienced are like, there were always jokes growing up about like guys who like live in their mother's basements when they're in their 30s, and like play video games all day kind of thing. And like I even know a couple people who have taken a kind of a life choice where like They didn't really go to school, but instead like stay home and like live at home with their parents. But Kikikomori is is a whole nother thing, because like if you're someone who like just chooses to stay at home, first of all, typically it's economic. Like it's not like you just want to live at home forever. It's more of like, I don't have the means to afford a house, and I don't know how else to do stuff, so I'm going to stay here. But like, I have a good friend I grew up with, and she very much stays at home, and she has really no desire to leave like living home. But she goes out, she goes to conventions, she does art, she interacts and sells stuff to people. Like she can go shopping, she can function in society. Right. She just chooses to do it in a different way. Hikikomori like are literally, they want nothing to do with other people, and
yep.
It's a challenging system, and so like I love that we kind of get a glimpse into that with Adara, because she did go through a major phase like that, and she falls back into it when her life starts getting easy and she starts just avoiding things.
Yeah, definitely.
Powerful imagery. What did you find was really like, was there anything in particular that really stuck out to you that you would like never known before, or something that that just impressed you about Adara's journey in particular?
Wow, tough question. I don't know. It's like, I think the circumstances of how she became a hikikomori in the first place are like very credible. Like it's very easy to see how it happens when you're first shown her school years and how she's kind of like trying very hard, and the world is just like completely rejecting her around her. And then she gets like this one little taste of freedom, basically, not having to worry about her normal everyday life. It's made very credible, I think.
It is it's such a beautiful way to tell that story, because like you come away from it being like, I don't think I could ever live like that, or I've never experienced like ever that desire to live like that. But then you can kind of follow her journey. You can be like, I can really kind of understand, like on a sympathetic level. But then like I have to admit, like it's really hard for me to relate, because it's like I have times where I've been really lazy. I have times where I've been like wanting to just stay in bed all day, and that's so different, because like that's just me like wanting to just take a break, kind of an idea. That's so different from what Adara went through, where she stayed in her room, and the motivations are so much more. They're hard to tangible on. So I'm gonna go on a bit of a personal tangent. I mentioned this before, but I had a really interesting experience while playing this game. About episode 15. I had somebody who had been who'd been on the Discord channel a few times, personally start messaging me, and he explained that like while he'd hinted at in some of his conversations that he had a kind of similar relatable lifestyle to the Chuusotsu in the series, he was able to come forward to me, and he talked a bit more about saying like, you need to understand, like you've been asking questions about like why people would live like this, and because I was expressing, I was like, I was saying, it's hard for me to relate, because it's like, even at my most, like, I just don't want to deal with people times in my life, after a few hours, I'm ready to brush off and go back out there. And so, like, being someone who could willingly want to stay in their room for months on end is something that's just, it's hard for me to truly relate to, just because it's so different from my experiences. And so he messaged me, he just said, like, look, this story could be about me, and so I'd love to chat with you about it and help you answer and understand the questions. And I did my best to understand, and I think I got some good insights about it. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, he talked about, for him, how he kind of grew up normally, everything was going pretty well, but then eventually had an incident in school where he kind of got into an argument with some more like aggressive students. And they also happened to be fairly popular, and so they kind of started turning a bunch of people against him. Very similar. He said it was very. He started really feeling like the parallels when Adara started seeing the message boards going crazy about like Chuusotsu. he said that was very relative because he felt like at school that was what happened to him. Was kind of got a bunch of people who didn't really understand his position, his family's lifestyle, and like the reason why he like how he was like a little bit different. It became used as against him for tactics of being like bullied, and he had threats against his life, and like to the point where he started becoming really scared to just go anywhere by himself. And he also then went through some tragedies where there were some like losses in close family members. He also had the people who he was close to, his friends, and romantically involved with, all kind of like jump ship on him, mostly because he wasn't around anymore, because he was kind of keeping to himself. And then he slowly became more and more isolated. And he expressed to me, this is where I wish I could be better at sympathizing and understanding, but this is where it starts stepping into territory that I've just never truly experienced, even a little bit. And so I do my best, but it started getting to this point where for him, just going outside was so anxiety inducing that he just didn't want to. And the thing that he said that most people don't seem to understand is that now he's kind of living that lifestyle, he finds that he's content there. And that's something that I think a lot of people can struggle with, because it's just like, oh, but don't you think you'll feel better if you get out and do stuff and like go out and like make friends and stuff? But for him and for Adara, that really wasn't the case. It's like, no, I genuinely am comfortable here, and if I break my system, I'm going to be overwhelmed in every way possible. And so it's not even so much like he told me, he said like, I congratulate the character Adara because she clearly decides that she wanted to be better, like she wanted to change her life and to be something different. And he's like, I can really understand that idea, but he personally wasn't at that point. Well, Mel, maybe he'll get there someday, maybe he won't. But he was saying like, don't be so overly concerned with trying to fix people who are like me. It's far better to try and just understand that the world is a little different through our eyes. And he also talked about how like it was really good in the news story that was talking about hikikomori, that they had programs to try and help kind of rehabilitate them people who are living that really sheltered life back into the mainstream. But like how like it's not like required lessons, and they try and the focus is mostly just getting them to come to a lesson once or twice a month, because that's what's really about. It's about like helping them if they want to be helped, because if you try to force them, it defeats the point of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point of view to hear.
Yeah, and I don't think I did it justice, but I also like I don't want to give so much away that anyone could ever even remotely like tie to him, because I don't want to like call him out, and I don't want people to get, like he said that he one time opened up about this somewhere online, and he got like a lot of like hate letters about it, and people were being very aggressive against him, which, you know, exactly the opposite of what you'd want. So I don't want that to ever happen here, but I just want to try and express to you who are listening, like it can seem so alien, that it can seem like this is something that just happens in stories, but it's actually real. And in Japan, it's a problem. Like, it's becoming a staple. And I think they said they estimate 30,000 people live the hikikomori lifestyle. Like, that's not insignificant. That's a like, maybe it's a small part of the population, but that's a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen even larger estimates. Like I just did a quick Google and I found an article from BBC saying there's 500,000 of them in Japan.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot more.
Yeah, that's 1.5% of the whole population, which is like really huge for the whole society if you think about it. But I guess it's very difficult to even estimate the number.
And I think I remember the reading too, like it said that like hikikomori, like the lifestyle is more prevalent in the East, especially in South Korea and Japan. Japan's probably number one, but South Korea is seeing it too. And they believe it has a lot to do with the very traditional, like the culture of those
definitely.
nations. And in Japan, it's funny because the culture of Japan is very similar to what we see in Chuusotsu. The idea that like all people have a role and that they should be functioning in a way that helps benefit society as a whole. Like the focus culturally is a lot less on the individual. Surely there's not quite to that point in Chuusotsu, obviously that's an extreme, but the idea that your self-worth is tied to the way you contribute to society reinforces for people who are struggling to feel like they have a place or want to have a place in society. Like, I imagine that like the negativity that they would experience the few times they do step out and try and like maybe decide a different path is right for them, that I imagine that stress and pressure is a big reason why they end up staying where they are. It's really hard when you feel like your friends and family are constantly judging you for your choices, no matter what those choices are.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of several different factors that are making it such a big issue in these Asian countries in particular. Like, it's something that happens to some degree anywhere in the world, like in the example that you just brought up. But I think certain social factors combine in places like Japan to make it more likely, like what you mentioned about the role of individual in society, but also some other things like how the family unit works and how much society interferes with people, the lack of different social safety nets, things like that. Like here in Finland, it would be very difficult for exactly this kind of thing to happen because the family wouldn't let it happen. Like, you wouldn't have somebody bringing you food for 10 years in a row in your room and not do anything about it. But in Japan, that can happen.
Oh yeah, and especially because I think I'm an outsider looking in, so take my thoughts with a grain of salt. But from what I've seen and heard, big part of that comes from like this like the idea that like family matters are to be kept in the family kind of tradition.
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
It's far more important to like if there is an issue, keep it within the family until it's resolved, and that can easily lead to somebody being just kind of around and not really anyone else knowing that there could be an issue or a struggle or a disagreement. The best I can relate to a lot of this personally comes from my family, and it's funny because I plan on seeing a lot of these families in the near future. But on my mother's side of the family, it's I come from a very religious background family. Yep. And while I don't want to dive into my personal philosophies, I will say that I tend to have some deviating opinions from them. Not majorly, but enough where it can cause tension. And certain individuals can kind of make things very uncomfortable, and unfortunately, like, can make it more like feel like every time we get together there's like we're on the brink of a verbal brawl, and that alone I can understand. It's like it makes me just not want to talk about certain subjects because I know if it ever comes up and I open my mouth and say what I'm actually thinking, that for the next 3 hours it's just going to be miserable for everybody.
Right.
And it's tough because like that's such a small microscopic version of this problem, and yet I know I avoid things like that, like the plague. And so like if that's how you feel about everything you do, it'd be terrifying.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, so I encourage anybody who's listening. I think we'll get to more lighter topics in just a bit, because I've got a few fun questions about the series. But I wanted to talk about this stuff because it's really important. And I think if there's anything you can take from Chuusotsu besides like whatever personal messages kind of stuck out to you, I would say like remember like Adara's story especially, and know that there are people who fall into those types of lifestyles, and whether they want to be there or not. And whether we understand that or not, I think we need to make sure we stay, compassionate and willing to listen and understand. Because that's not, like, they don't need people yelling at them and telling them that they need to shape things up. They don't need somebody forcing them to go out to a social gathering. Like, they need people who can be understanding first. And then offering them opportunities if they feel like they want to try and do something different. Like let them know that you're there and are supportive of them, but make sure that you also are respectful. Because, like I said, when I talked to the one guy, that was the biggest thing. He felt like anytime he opened up with people, it felt he was taking a huge risk of retaliation. And remember how awful it felt, like for me especially, when Adara like tried to like defend her position on the chat rooms, and then all her personal information started getting leaked and everything. Like, no one deserves that.
Yeah, that was pretty rough, and especially because I felt that was so real. Like, that's exactly how chat rooms work in the current day.
And it's getting way worse than it used to be too. Like nowadays, like it can get so bad so quick, and very rarely do people actually deserve it, because like there's so many times where that kind of stuff happens based on rumors. You know, like there's no evidence. Like, what was that? I can't remember his name. There's that voice actor. Who'd been in a lot of prominent like English dubs of anime, and like he was accused of having like illicit relations with younger girls. Later, it's come out that he's not being tried in court because there's no evidence. Like, nobody can provide evidence. Yet his entire career got derailed. Who knows if he'll actually get it back?
Basically publicly lynched online.
Yeah, like, that's scary. Like I can understand it's nice to be able to like try and bring justice to people who seem untouchable, but like the internet doesn't go through the judiciary system or examine evidence. And it's like Adara got the shotgun blast of the internet, and it's like that happens to real people.
Yeah, and it can be like just really mean. Like, if people are bashing on something which is the most popular thing to do online, and you try to like actually argue there and give the opposing point of view, then you'll just get murdered.
I know, right? Agree. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to the serious part of this. Like, we're gonna be wrapping up pretty soon, but I want to like talk about a bit of the like lighter series. I guess was there a particular scene that really just like was your favorite for, I don't know, maybe the comedic side of it, or maybe like the philosophical discussion of it? Like, was there one that really stuck out to you as you read this one?
Wow, there are so many. Maybe the one after the first time leap when I get to the apartment and Arara is there sitting on top hollow. That was a pretty awesome scene. Like, what's happening here?
Was that the one where Kiara came out for the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Though she's not named there.
That was shocking. I was already like, whoa, they're time leaping, this is crazy. And then I got there, I was like, what is even happening here? I want to know more about her. Like what is the story about Arara and Kiara? Like, that's such an interesting, because it like I could explain like multiple personalities disorder, but I don't think so. I think it has something to do with her. Like, she's super unique and she has those extra abilities. Like, I want to know, like, is it something that happened because of those or what?
Yeah, I'm thinking she probably has like some family history behind it, but she's also a genius, or would be if she wasn't a Chuusotsu. It's a very interesting combination of things.
I think I mentioned it before, because I think my favorite part was absolutely when they Adara invited Adara to be in bed with her, and they had the conversation about like girls liking girls. Like, I just thought that was just so bubbly and hilarious, and it was we got to see such a unique side to Arara, because up to that point she was always that suave, confident attitude, but that was the first time we really got to see her kind of break down to her more honest self, and I just loved that scene.
Good point, yeah.
And then I also there was also like the two like very flirtatious girls that just kind of kept popping up randomly.
Yeah, Freud and Jung. Yeah.
Part of me is wondering maybe the reason why they were, because I remember asking myself like about halfway through, I was like, why do they keep coming up? Like, I understand having like interesting background characters, but like they were like constantly involved in major decisions all the time, but like in such a passive way. So maybe they're going to be important characters in the future. Like, maybe we'll have a future series where we focus a bit more on those two, or maybe we'll see a flashback series where we find out like how they got so close.
Yeah, probably. I think they're going to be recurring characters in future games as well. That's my guess. But they're more like, I wouldn't say they're like comic relief. It's more like something that kind of expands the world a little from other perspective when you're listening to their chats and seeing their reactions and stuff like that. It's difficult to explain, but I can clearly see the role that they're having as side characters in this game.
Yeah. I guess like it also was interesting because like most of like the relationship stuff on the main three was very subtle, you know, with Adara and Ara.
Right.
But like with those two, there was nothing subtle. Flat out talking in public about like going home and doing terribly amazing things to each other. And so it's like, you know, this is like the mall, right?
Right. By the way, I realized we haven't really talked about philosophy yet.
Oh,
I'm sure you probably have something about that.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, like I was just thinking about the whole question of what makes a wonderful life in this instance, and I just realized that the first answer that they come up with actually makes a lot of sense. Like they'll just default to that. Well, of course, you need to have a wonderful seal in this world, like the most powerful seal.
Mm-hmm.
But towards the end of the game, you actually realize that the answer is so wrong. Because, for example, Kokoro does have one of the most powerful seals in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think she has a wonderful life.
No, and like, it's so perfect because like the seal, like it really is it's a stand-in for like the idea of having a place in society. Like having a seal is having a place and having a good place in society, like a successful one. But like the idea that they were pursuing is the idea of like external success, of like, oh yeah, you work in the government, you have like a lot of extra resources and you're really strong and you can do whatever you really want to. Like, so that's seen as success. But like then at the end, Adara has her like revelation where like she'd be sad to see her manga get burned, but she's like, that manga is important to me because of its meaning, not because of its existence. And she has that kind of realization of being like, yeah, okay, you can burn it because that's like their physical representation of what matters to me. And and that's what The Wonderful Life really was all about. Was about it's funny because like they never really stated what the answer was, which drove me crazy. But I like that. Let's just speculate. Because I think that the answer falls in line with like following your heart kind of idea of like that you can find happiness even if it's not monetarily successful or like society wouldn't like consider it to be like a prominent position. But if it makes you happy and defines who you are, that's really what really matters.
Yeah, I think all the ingredients are there in the game for you to come up to your own conclusion, which is probably going to be pretty similar for most people. Mm-hmm. But it's more tasteful to not actually put it into words because the actual details that people come up with might be slightly different.
Oh yeah, and it lets us all like find out what we think that answer is, and like it's a good idea because then it also sparks conversation. Because I'm guessing your answer to that, what you think the key is different from mine.
Yeah, I can't say I was really even thinking about it from my own perspective, just from the perspective of the game and what in that context would be the answer that they would come up with. And I think you actually really nailed in that one episode where you talked about like having that one thing that you really love and really are invested into, and that came up even more later in the game. So like when you already jumped into that point, I was like, yeah, that's exactly where it's going for, I think.
Oh, awesome. Like sometimes the episodes blur in my mind a little bit, but like as you mentioned it, I do remember having that conversation with the camera, like the idea, and it's very because like I find it very relatable. Her manga, her dream of being a manga artist, I find it very parallels a lot with my enjoyment of visual novels. I always, of course, I toy with the idea like it'd be fun to like cover visual novels, help create visual novels, and like make YouTube content that I watch these YouTubers that like make a living off of just doing like following content that they love, and I find that I sit there and I'm like, wow, wouldn't that be cool if I could do that? But then I also have that dose of reality, kind of like Adara, that like that's very, 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 very ambitious and very unlikely. But like, is what matters the fact that I whether or not I can be successful pursuing a dream, or is it more important that I pursue it because I love it? And that's the idea. Is like, I could never gain another subscriber for the rest of my life. And I could still love making these videos and talking about this stuff because it is something that matters to me because of what it is.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing to have. I'm very, very lucky that I've been able to find something that supplements my life so well.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And for me, I guess it's the company itself, which is doing all the things I always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Life's an adventure, and it's worth going out and like pushing the limits.
Yeah. Speaking of ROS manga aspirations, I guess I can give a small teaser for the contents of the side story, because I actually just got the translated one this week. I haven't played it yet, I'm really looking forward to that, but the translation is finished now, so I got the scripts. And I know that... I don't know if it takes place after the events or during like some extra time skips that didn't actually happen in the game, like alternate time skip or something like that. But they're basically going to comic it to, I think, sell ROS manga or something. So that's going to be quite interesting.
That'll be awesome. Oh, now I'm excited. I can't wait. Like I'm ever since you told me that like the 1.5 would be coming out at some point, I was just like, yes. I want to read it. I absolutely want to cover it on the channel. That would be so fun. Like, this series has really captured me. Like, everything. I've been really lucky because like if any of you don't know, my guest here today, he works with a company that helps translate a lot of visual novels and publishes them in other countries. And
nice.
huh?
Oh, you're talking about me?
Yeah, you.
Okay.
I was saying that you represent and work with Fruit Bat Factory, who helps distribute these. So he's actually been at the forefront of helping me, helping by recommending certain various titles that they've been able to translate. And I feel like every one of them's like effectively been a home run. Like I've yet to be disappointed. And so, like, if you haven't been following Fruit Bat Factory, this is like personal opinion, of course, but absolutely, like follow them, see what they're working on. They're grabbing a lot of smaller titles that like you wouldn't like hear about otherwise, but like I've seen a consistent level of quality and good storytelling. So thank you for your support and helping me, but also thanks for taking me to these awesome games like Seabed and what was the other one? It was the Enigma. 7 Mysteries one, right?
Enigma. Oh, and Miniature Corner as well.
Yeah, Enigma was good too. Oh, they were also good. But I think Seabed might still be my number one. Like, Chuusotsu was really good, but Seabed got me crying by the end. So that was a really
I definitely don't fault you for that. It's definitely one of my favorite visual novels ever.
Ah, so good. So yeah, shameless plug of you guys, but absolutely. It's a good place to go. I guess I do want to wrap things up pretty soon. Is there anything in particular you wanted to say or something you thought of while we've been discussing all this stuff?
I thought of a million things and forgot them right away.
Yeah.
So nothing is on my mind right now.
Nice, sounds good. I think I'd love to give you a chance to kind of talk about like anything that might be coming up that would be of interest to anybody who's interested. I guess like so you mentioned like there's 1.5. Do you want to clarify that a little bit for anyone who doesn't know what the heck we're talking about?
Right. Yeah, the Chuusotsu 1.5th graduation, The Moving Castle is the subtitle. Is actually an all-new side story that was funded on the Kickstarter, so it hasn't come out anywhere yet. It will get the first worldwide release through us in English and Japanese.
Ooh,
so that will be interesting. And nice. It has some interesting-looking side characters.
Oh no! I'm so excited. Oh man! So yeah, like keep an eye out for that. Do you have a timetable when we can expect that, or is it still kind of up in the air because of production?
I'm guessing sometime this summer. Between other things, like we are also gearing toward the release of 7 Days, which is another Kickstarter-funded localization project of ours, and a pretty big profile one as well. So it's kept us busy.
So what's that one about? If you can share a little bit about it.
Right. It's basically about this guy who gets a cursed video and gets haunted by 7 dead girls.
That doesn't sound
And
fun.
they all have like 1 week before they pass on, so that sounds like fun.
Interesting. Okay. So it's almost like they're like maybe a chance for them to like find final fulfillment that they never had in life. Oh, fascinating. All right. Well, thank you so much once again. It's awesome to have you, and it's awesome just to have someone to chat with. Like, of course, like I'll do these wrap parties by myself if needed, but I always like keeping the door open for anybody who has something interesting to add after we watch the series. So thank you so much for joining me. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for covering us as always. It's really fun to see you bring life to this series.
Even with my terrible voice acting.
No, it's great.
So good.
Don't sell yourself short.
Well, I don't know. Some of those, like, I told the video, I've been doing the House in Fata Morgana on Mondays, and I was doing one of those recording sessions, and my wife she'd had a long nap or something earlier that day because I was recording it on Sunday, and so she was like, normally she's asleep when I do these sessions, but she was awake and like on her phone, and she said she heard me doing one of the female character voices because she had a lot of lines, and she like, I came into the bedroom afterwards, and she's just like, what were you doing in there? I was like, you were sounding really scary. And I was like, no, I wasn't supposed to be scary.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was awesome. All right, but thank you so much once again. And if you guys have reached the end of this, thank you so much. I appreciate everything you guys do. This channel is so much more fun because you guys are, I have like people who follow the series and join me. Again, I love saying like this channel is not so much a gaming channel, though I have to identify it like that. Ultimately, I see this like a literature club. This is something where we can read stories together and talk about them. So if for some reason this is like your first experience on my channel, like I invite you to look around, find something, and if you think you like what you see, like get it for yourself, read it with me, and like compare notes, and we can discuss it. And then I usually keep I'll keep the chat rooms open and archived, so if you go on our Discord and you want to talk about a series I've concluded, absolutely we'll see it, and I'll do my best to answer and like talk about it, because you know, stories never die. And I don't think we should just let them fade even after we've enjoyed them. So thank you so much. Hope to see you on the Discord channel. And, you know, until the next video you watch with me or whatever to see me in next, I will see you there.